Hello, Lemonsterites. It's your State Representative Natalie Higgins, still zooming to you from my home office that really is not going to win any awards on Room Rater. You would think after a year of this, I would have figured it out. But we're here for the February episode, and I am so thrilled to be joined by Rep. Michael Kushmerek, the newest rep from the other Twin City, Fitchburg, and part of Lunenburg. And I really, really valued the relationship that I had with his predecessor, Rep. Stephen Hay, and I'm so excited for Michael to be taking on this new role and working as a part of the delegation. And Michael, welcome.
Natalie, thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be joining you, and even more excited to be working with you in this upcoming legislative session.
Yeah, it's how is it going? How is it feeling? It's totally different from my start 4 years ago. We weren't meeting like this.
So it's going really well. It's certainly busy. Every day I get the sense that I'm drinking from the end of a fire hose, but in a good way. It's exciting to be accelerating into a learning curve, and every day comes with new learning lessons. And in fact, I'd say at this point, it's almost every minute there's a new learning lesson and a new excuse to find out something new. Everyone always tries to compare it, I think, so many other incumbents to their first term. I guess the blessing here is I don't know what I'm missing, right? Mm-hmm. For me, this is the new normal, and I think my fellow freshmen and I all feel the same way. Of this is what we think of as normal in terms of the new legislative session. Is we conduct ourselves on Zoom, and we don't get to have the opportunity to meet inside the State House. We meet right here in each other's living rooms and offices.
It does make it easier, I will say, from the Central Mass folks to be able to participate in things, because we used to have to pick between being in Boston and being at home for district events. So you definitely can attend a lot more.
Absolutely. And there's no longer an excuse. You can't say you're in Boston or in the district. You can jump right from one to another. And so it's both a blessing and a curse, right? It's I think your day starts at 8 a.m. in the morning and ends around 8 p.m. And there's usually 12 consecutive hours with Zoom, and you hit the mute button and you eat a sandwich 5 minutes into a briefing, and then you jump back in. And so that's exciting, though, that you don't have to choose between competing priorities. You can do it all.
Yeah. So for folks who are less familiar with you, give me a little bit of your background, how you decided to run for city council, state representative, what inspired you to run for office?
Sure. So I think everyone always assumes you grew up in your district and that you started at the early age and you went through the public school system. For me, it's a little bit different. I grew up on the North Shore and came out to Fitchburg for what I thought would be a quick 4-year stint at Fitchburg State University. And it turned out to be the exact opposite. I came at age 17 to Fitchburg State, and I've never left Fitchburg since. And it's been my home ever since. And met the girl, married the girl, and Carissa.
So you and Carissa met at Fitchburg State when you were here in
Met
Fitchburg?
at Fitchburg State.
Awesome.
And in my senior year, I had kind of made a public proclamation of, nothing is going to deter me. As soon as I graduate, I'm getting in the car and I'm going down to Washington, D.C. And literally hours later, I met my future wife. And and I'll tell you, the Washington, D.C. Dream was quickly replaced within, just a couple of months. And I knew that, we were serious enough. We wanted to stick it out. And I worked at Fitchburg State University for 8 years, immediately after I graduated, doing alumni relations and fundraising work, and then moved to Worcester Polytechnic Institute, Northeastern University, where I focused on fundraising primarily for first-generation college students, making sure we can break down some of those barriers to access and affordability in higher ed that we know is so prevalent, not only within our districts, but across the Commonwealth. And that's kind of the common theme for me is, I grew up in a really modest and humble upbringing, and my family was on welfare and food stamps, and I talked a lot about during the campaign around the family struggles with mental health and substance abuse and later homelessness, and I think all too often, folks don't talk about those stories, but we know that that is ever present in our community, each of those issues. And so many in our district struggle with those same issues in their own homes. But at the same time, fewer and fewer are talking about their ability to overcome those struggles. And so, well, all too often people are like, well, that's great. You picked yourself up by your bootstraps. And I'm like, well, no, it was lucky breaks. It was helping hands. It was resources and mentors that helped to get me there and overcome those obstacles. And those same resources aren't available equitably to everyone in our community, and certainly not throughout this Commonwealth. And so at the end of the day, that's why I ran, was because I know that these issues are in everyone's family and in everyone's community, but we need to talk about it more. And we need to remove the stigma around mental health and substance abuse, around poverty and homelessness. We need to talk about them. We need to confront these issues head on. And we need to ensure that they are not predetermining factors on whether or not you succeed or fail in life.
No, I want to thank you for sharing like your personal story and lifting it up and turning it into policy. And we need more of that. And I imagine that you've heard from a lot of folks who are willing to share their stories with you because you have been vulnerable and shared your own family struggles.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's, I'll admit, it was never a comfortable thing when I first started talking about it along the campaign trail. And even at times as a Fitchburg City Councilor these past 8 years, every now and then, there would be an issue that really intersected with my own personal story, and I'd talk about it. And it's not comfortable, right? And it takes a lot of time. And even now, I've been talking about it for a year in my personal background. It's not always comfortable, but I know that so many in our community are facing these issues. And if I'm asking them to approach me at their most vulnerable moments, I know I need to be willing to be vulnerable myself. And I know I need to be willing to be uncomfortable and talk about the struggles that I've had so that others can feel comfortable picking up the phone or meeting me face to face and saying, I need your help. I'm in this bad situation.
Yeah. And
because that's what we know is the most fulfilling part of the job, is helping people through those situations, right?
And it's why I'm so excited to have you joining the Mental Health, Substance Use and Recovery Committee. It's my third session serving on this committee, but I think it's really important that we talk about reducing the stigma, ending the stigma around mental health in our community. We've done a lot to talk about addiction and get more comfortable talking about that. We often don't talk about the underlying trauma that coincides with like mental health needs and the need to have mental health resources in Central Mass and Western Mass, make sure they're accessible to everyone. For me, really making sure that they're accessible to young people, because that is a population that struggles, especially in more rural or suburban communities, to have access to the services that they need.
Absolutely. I mean, mental health around, if for the young, the poor, the elderly, these are communities that I often feel are neglected when it comes to mental health. And I think everyone is the first to say, oh, absolutely, we need to talk about mental health. But it's never, we need to talk about it because it's here in our community and because it's here in our own personal lives and our own family. And my mother, who just recently passed a month ago, she struggled her entire adult life with mental health. It defined a huge part of her life and her struggles. And it certainly and significantly impacted, my upbringing and my fellow siblings. And there weren't always the resources there for her, certainly. And, it wasn't something that you talked about. And I remember the first time I talked about it publicly, it was my own siblings saying, what are you doing? We don't talk about this outside the house. That's wrong. We need to be able to talk about it outside the house because we're not the only ones going through it. And it's sad that there aren't enough, access points to mental health care and treatment. And we have a long way to go. And honestly, that was one of my top priorities, is getting on the Mental Health and Substance Abuse Committee. And I could not be more thrilled to be working with you on it.
Yeah, I'm so sorry for your loss. And I'm so grateful that you were able to use your story, your mom's story, to really enact some really good policy. And I know that you're working on some really exciting things heading into the new session. We talked a little bit about committees. We got our committee assignments last Friday. We're filming this on a Monday, the 15th of February. How are you feeling about your committee assignments? Are you excited? Are you ready.
So excited.
Yeah.
So excited. I think, there's this hurry up and wait moment of you're sworn in, and the next thing you want to know is, what are my committee assignments? What can I really start to sink my teeth into? And what do I really get to become a subject matter expert in some areas? And where can I have the most meaningful impact on policy and legislation? And so mental health and substance abuse was one of my top requests, and I got it. And the next, is an issue that we talk about all too often in the North Central region: community development and small business. And so when we talk about economic development, we talk about the impact of small business, I know that's an overwhelming need in my community. And so I couldn't be more happy to be a member of that committee. But then also public service, and then the Standing House Committee on Human Resources and Employee Engagement. There's a lot of work to be done along those lines, and excited to serve under Vice Chair Higgins on the Public Service Committee. Yeah,
so this is kind of breaking news, at least in terms of my Access TV show. I was named Vice Chair of Public Service. So I'm really, really thankful to Speaker Mariano for giving me this opportunity to learn about the pension system and really dig into a policy area I am, will admittedly say, less than familiar with, but it's the blessing of this job that you really get to be kind of like a jack of all trades and learn about so many different issues. And you've gotten excellent committees. I've served on every single one of them except for public service. So we're going to be in it together, learning. But community development and small businesses, to be able to share the stories of the small businesses in this region, in your district, and the needs, and really lift up. It's something that we do really well in North Central Mass, kind of working together to really get the region to be spotlighted, because it's incredibly hard for us to get as much airtime as the Boston delegation gets. There's a whole lot more of them.
Just the committee assignment announcement, and particularly being assigned to the community development and small business was kind of serendipitous. I came back within an hour of getting the assignments. I had just come back from a tour with Senator Cronin, touring some of the spots in Fitchburg of, where some of the areas of growth are happening, but then also really assessing the needs that we have and some of the opportunities that are on the horizon. And so I think you just hit it on the head of, when you hear about success, it's, in the media, it's often the success of those greater Boston communities. But we know here locally, there's such incredible stories of success and achievement by our small business community. But we need to do a lot more, and we need to make sure that the state is investing, equitably in North Central Massachusetts and throughout the Commonwealth, not just in the greater Boston area. And I'm excited to be able to work with some of my new fellow committee members to bring them out to my district and to brag about the success out here, but then also to see theirs and see some of those common themes and common struggles across the Commonwealth as well.
No, that's fantastic. And I'm really excited to be back on Ways and Means, back on mental health, substance use, and recovery. And I'm newly appointed to the Children, Families, and Persons with Disabilities Committee, which is a committee that I have a lot of respect for the work that they're doing. And just I'm really excited to be able to be a part of that committee as well. So it's going to be an awesome session and a lot of work. And I'm hoping, as much as we've talked about how Zoom has made it difficult, I'm hoping that Zoom gives us the opportunity in this video conferencing to have constituents testify in a way that maybe they didn't have access to when the hearings were happening exclusively in the State House. So I'm looking forward to hearing more and more local testimony throughout. There's got to be silver linings to COVID-19, and I think that this is one of them.
I think you're absolutely right. You break down some of the barriers to access and availability, right? You can now have folks who might be working in the middle of the day step out or take a break and be able to add testimony in the middle of a day. And working or location or health may no longer be a barrier to being able to deliver such important testimony.
Right. And so, new session, first session, what exciting bills are you working on? Because this is always a big ask of the new folks about kind of like, what are they focusing on? Where are they going to kind of stake their expertise?
Absolutely. And so I'm trying to approach this as, twofold, right? There's real practical and pragmatic areas of policy areas that I'd like to have an impact on, but then also realizing that as a legislator, exactly 6 weeks in today to the new role, this is a learning opportunity, and I know that you and other members of our North Central delegation have been so incredibly helpful in walking me through this process of introducing and filing legislation. So I'm excited. One of the signature bills that I'll be filing is called the Municipal Choice Bill, that really talks about and looks to tackle energy regulation and allowing municipalities to buy back the infrastructure. So in Fitchburg, it would give the city of Fitchburg and even neighboring Lunenburg the opportunity to purchase the infrastructure back from Unitil, electrical infrastructure, and allowing them to form their own municipal lighting company aimed at tackling, the ever increasing rates by some of our energy providers. And my hope there is that we can have a meaningful impact on municipalities across the Commonwealth, but particularly here in the 3rd Worcester District, making sure that Fitchburg and Lunenburg don't continue to pay the highest rates in the Commonwealth for electricity, that they can take some of that decision back and put it in their own hands at the local level to decide if they want to form their own municipal lighting company. But also excited to be able to tackle an issue with COVID-19. We don't pay taxes on food or clothing, yet we are paying taxes right now on everything from face masks to face shields and hand sanitizer, and excited to be filing a piece of legislation that looks to remove sales tax there. It may be a small bit of money, but at the end of the day, I want to make sure that the state is not making revenue off of the needs of those combating the pandemic right now. And so trying to look at everything from, daily impact in our community for electricity to, those, all of us are still struggling right now through the pandemic and the needs that are placed on us there. And then also looking at, celebrating some history as well. Worked with a fellow freshman, Kip Diggs from the Cape. And together we filed a Rosa Parks bill to annually recognize Rosa Parks and her incredible, accomplishments and achievements as part of Black History Month every February 4th.
And this is a local priority, right? This was kind of started by a group of Fitchburg residents.
That's exactly it. It was a local congregation that brought it to me. A number of members came forward and asked that I'd consider refiling a bill that Rep. Hay had filed in the last session. And excited to work with them and excited to continue the legacy and the work that my predecessor, Rep. Hay, had begun, and excited to work with the Black and Latino Caucus in Massachusetts. This is a wonderful first time for me to work alongside them to accomplish a priority and something that's meaningful, meaningful as part of Black History Month, but meaningful for the Commonwealth to recognize the impact that African Americans have had. Not just here in the Commonwealth, but across the entire country.
That's fantastic. And I'll bring up one of the bills that I've been heavily recruiting you to work with me on, which is the retrofitting Gateway City's homes or other low-income homes to be net zero. So this is an iteration of a bill that I filed last session with Rep. Andy Vargas, and it made it partially into the big environmental bill that we sent to the governor and are still kind of working on making sure it gets back to his desk and with its full intent as we wrote it. But this is a really important conversation about utility costs can be the budget breakers for so many of our families in our communities. And if we could remove some of those utility costs, help turn single families, small multifamilies around to be net zero, it's good for the environment. It's also really good for these homeowners and renters to make sure that they can afford to continue to live in their homes.
Natalie, I applaud you. I mean, it's common sense legislation that will have a huge impact right here in our own community and across the Commonwealth. And I'm thrilled to be able to work with you on this. And and again, that's a common theme of I just can't begin to express my gratitude for how amazing you've been and really trying to help me acclimate. Again, 6 weeks in, every day and every minute is a learning lesson, and you've been wonderful about really bringing me along and
we remember what it's
ensuring that I'm
like.
up to speed.
We remember what it's like to be new, and I cannot imagine coming into this space remotely. Tell me what was your first session like in your voting? Because for folks who aren't familiar, we vote on a conference call line because we can't even vote via Zoom because not every one of our reps and have access to internet at home, right? Like that's something that we forget for folks west of us, that internet access is incredibly difficult and often just doesn't exist in our smaller communities.
Well, that's exactly it, and certainly the Third Worcester is not immune from that either. We still struggle with high-speed broadband access in all corners of the district, and a lot of room for improvement there, here, and for many other districts. And so for me, I think you have in your head what you expect that moment to be like the first time you get to cast a vote in session. And, I think when I was sworn in, I was looking forward to that moment being on the floor, of the House. And that came, on a Friday, I think, 3 weeks ago. And exciting, a once in a generation opportunity to vote on, substantive climate change policy. And I was so honored to be able to do it. And you're sitting on a conference line watching, with the public right on Mass.gov, watching, the session unfold in front of you and being on a conference line and participating. And even knowing I wasn't on a camera, I still felt like this is my first time. I put on the suit, tightened the tie, put the lapel pin on. And then I realized I'm sitting here in front of a camera where no one can see me in a full suit. So for kicks, I also put on some fuzzy slippers as well.
The slippers are vital, especially in the winter.
Slippers are key. Exactly. I've learned that quickly.
I've got mine on right now. There's no heat in the second floor of our house. So when I have to close that door when we're filming, fun fact, it gets really cold in here.
So it was an exciting moment, one I'll never forget. And it was exciting too that, I was able to, as soon as the session was over, I was able to go and celebrate with my wife. And it wasn't an hour commute to go from the State House to my wife. I could walk down the stairs and, and kind of celebrate that momentous occasion.
And what an important bill to have your first vote. I will always be envious of that for you. But we're kind of coming up on the end of our time. One of the questions we usually ask is, you've spent 8 years on the city council in Fitchburg, and that now you're a state representative. How can folks who are watching be better advocates? What tips do you have for folks to get involved or reach out to whatever level of government leaders about an issue they care about? Do you have any advice from all of the time that you've been doing this?
Absolutely. First it starts with just raising your hand and just whether it's coming to a meeting, tuning in for a meeting, asking a question, picking up the phone and calling anyone at any level. I think people are already amazed of, whether it was a city councilor or as a state representative, if you call the phone, you're going to get your local legislator. And it's usually us who either pick up the phone or return the phone call. And So start with advocating for something you care deeply about, at whatever level it may be. Pick up the phone and say that you care and be willing to have a conversation. And if you have expertise, be willing to lend that expertise and volunteer it. And if you want to learn more, just raise your hand again and say so. Of, at a board, a local commission, you can have a really meaningful impact on any specific matter or issue that confront your municipality. And I know, Natalie, that you and I are constantly looking for feedback of what does this look like in my district? And how do people feel in my district about this? And so I find it incredibly helpful when people pick up the phone or send me an email and say, I'm really passionate about this. I want you to know it. And that gives me the permission to say, I'm going to stop what I'm doing and I'm going to take a moment. I'm going to learn more about this issue because it's important to the people I represent. And all too often I'll pick up the phone and say, tell me more. What more do I need to know before I vote? And so don't be afraid, to all those at home, don't be afraid to pick up the phone or send an email because we care just as much about these issues as you do.
I couldn't have said it better. right? It is, I am so thankful for all of the expertise that my community shares with me about legislation. We cannot be experts in everything, right? So we need some help. And there's definitely spaces where I feel far more comfortable and I've done extensive work in, but for the environmental work, I really started working on this legislation, reaching out to some environmental advocates that I admire and say, I really want to work on this and I want it to be relevant to my community. What can we work on together? And that's how that legislation came about. And that's the coolest piece, to be able to say, like, I want to come into this space that maybe I don't have the best knowledge of, but I want to do it in a respectful way and really learn and try to make sure that it's going to impact communities like ours in a really meaningful way.
And there's nothing more fulfilling than speaking to a constituent and hearing what they have to say and hearing that passion come through the phone or come through a conversation.
So on that note, as we wrap up, we're still doing our office hours virtually. So on video or phone, Monday nights and Friday mornings, just email us. The contact information will be up on the screen after we wrap to get an appointment. Email us about what's going on. If you're having issues with your unemployment, with vaccine access, with healthcare access, any of those things that you think we can be helpful, we'll get you the information you need. We know that the vaccine distribution, we're filming this in the middle of February, has been rough, right? Like, it hasn't been working, and it definitely hasn't been working for North Central Mass residents. We want to hear from you. We share your frustrations. We need better access, and it can't be just in these mass vaccination centers that are really far away from our communities, right? Like, that doesn't mean that the most vulnerable in our cities and towns are going to have access to this. So we're trying to share your stories. Anytime you email us, I'm sending them over to DPH. Please don't stop sending them. And we really want to make sure that your voices are being heard. And that's one of those roles that we can play. So thank you for tuning into the February episode of Representing Leominster. Looking forward to seeing you in March, and stay safe. And thanks, Rep. Kushmerek, for joining us.
Thank you, Natalie.